Real quick, I'll tell you about HomeTeam first so that you guys are familiar with us. We provide a service, I think, that's a little above and beyond what's typical for home inspectors. And we also provide commercial property inspections. And Sean and I've had that discussion. In fact, Dan Balcom from your group has just joined our BNI. So we'll be communicating closely with that side of the business too. But in the home inspection side, pretty much everything that you need in a real estate transaction, you see that full list there, and that's also at our website that I would encourage you to visit. We've done very, very old homes. We last year did the oldest surviving home in Chapel Hill, going back to 1812. So we've got a ton of experience in new construction going all the way back, and you see that wide range of additional services. Our technology makes the process so much easier for agents and clients with online scheduling, customer service 24-hour, 8 to 5 weekdays, contract e-sign, online payment. We're Lockbox subscribers, confirmation and reminders, client's ability to pay online, just very easy to work with. We kind of bring you guys something that nobody else is offering, and that's a lot of your time back. You can make one phone call or go on our website, drop that order on us. We make all those things happen for you. We do on-site reviews. We'll also do Zoom reviews if your client's out of town. We try to keep that to a minimum because it is more time consuming for our guys, but it is something that's available. And then one of the things that I also do, and you'll see Radon is one of those, I do a number of technical training classes for realtors, or 4 overall: 2 on home inspection topics, 1 on HVAC systems, and the 1 on radon gas. Each of those classes is about an hour. And I'm going to talk today very specifically with an excerpt out of that radon gas class. So moving right into, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, and do interrupt me while I'm talking here if you have any questions about what I'm talking about, and or at the end we can answer questions about this or answer questions about what we do, how we do it, if you have any questions. But I would encourage you guys to consider HomeTeam a technical resource. I am always available. If you guys are out there and you see something in a home related to an inspection, you're doing a walkthrough and you see something odd or you haven't seen before, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to field those calls. It's service beyond a sale or even without a sale, but certainly we are very interested in the opportunity to work with you on your real estate transactions. Specifically today, talking about radon gas, why is it important for your client to get a radon test? Very bluntly, there is no spot in the triangle area that is not apt to have radon gas accumulating in the home. There are areas that it's more prevalent than others. Very specifically in the triangle, if you're in the eastern half of the triangle, it's much more prevalent than the western half because of rock formations underground. You'll see on a map coming up here in a little bit why that is. But radon gas is a decay product from uranium underground, and uranium is more prevalent in some places than others. It's typically found more prevalent in large granite deposits and that sort of thing. And the triangle is sitting on a geological formation that comes down out of Virginia. And there's just more uranium in the soil and higher radon because of that. And it literally, in our experience, very specifically in our experience, it literally depends on the piece of ground that a home is sitting on. I've got areas of the triangle that I firsthand can give you addresses where you could stand on one porch and throw, with a house with no radon, throw a rock and hit a house with high radon. So it literally, it doesn't even matter what happens in other parts of the neighborhood. One can be high, one can be low, very specifically for what's underground beneath that house. Backing up a little bit, the state of North Carolina and your real estate board take this very seriously, to the point that I believe a couple of years ago, it was a big push in real estate to just heighten awareness on radon prevention and testing and mitigation, to the point that, if I'm not mistaken, they instituted where you guys, as a part of your contract paperwork, actually have a client sign off if they decline to have radon test, and that is to relieve you from any liability later, because there's every expectation that in this area that there's potential for high radon in a particular area. So that's how seriously the state of North Carolina and your real estate board take this. What happens, it depends on what's under the home. So as you look at that radon gas, as that uranium decays, the radon is about a 5th generation decay product. It starts out as a solid, decays into a gas, and even some of the decay products from that gas convert back to solids that are microscopic solids that are actually floating in the dust, in the air in that home. Just like, when the light's just right, you can see dust particles floating. Well, there's radon, there's radioactive particles floating when you have that high radon. So very specifically, when you get radon accumulating in the house and you're breathing that over time, that is a product that's radioactive. It's descended from radon, from uranium. Uranium lasts a long time, and you see that billions of years, thousands of years, and then for radon, 3.8 days. Well, that's what's called the half-life. So in other words, a radioactive particle of radon has a half-life of 3.8 days. What that means is, if it is floating in the house today as 10 picocuries, in 3.8 days, that energy will be reduced to 5. In another 3.8 days, it'll be 2.5. So that energy dies off over time, of relatively short time, but is constantly being replaced by additional radioactive particles. And so that's very specifically what's dangerous about radon gas. And those particles are ionizing radiation. So when you breathe those in and they sit in the lungs, it's an energy that really can't penetrate the skin, but once it's inside your lungs, it's around those sensitive cells and just sits there and accumulates more and more and more over time. It can cause chemical changes in those cells and damage the DNA. And in fact, and you'll see some charts here in a minute, the ionizing radiation from radon gas impacts the health very specifically in a way similar to smoking. And that is just continuous low-level exposure over a long period of time. So being in it for a short period of time really doesn't mean that much. It's that just continuous exposure. It's measured in curies. It's quantified, we're quantifying it in picocuries. That's trillionths of a curie per liter of air. And just in the outdoor air, if you're just walking around outside, you're probably breathing an average of 0.4 picocuries all the time. The average indoor level is estimated across the country, and this is from a lot of data over a lot of years. The average indoor level is estimated to be about 1.3. I've done tons of tests in my house between just, curiosity, and if I'm testing the machine for any reason, I run between 1 to 1.2 picocuries in my house when I test. As it decays, it produces what's called the daughter products, and that's those things that are solids that you breathe in that are ionizing radiation in the lungs. And those, particles are, like I said, are not able to penetrate the outer level, but when you breathe into the lungs, that's where the damage comes in. The potential for damage comes in. And over time, that damage can lead to lung cancer. Outside, as that radon gas comes out of the ground, it just harmlessly dissipates and mixes in with the air. And that's why it just stays at low levels outside. But the problem in real estate transactions comes when that gas migrates into the home, but then it accumulates there. And it can do that in a number of ways. If you're on a slab, that radon gas can actually transmit through the microscopic capillaries in concrete. Concrete we consider it a solid, but it's porous. Obviously, moisture can get through it. Well, this radon gas is a very small molecule. It can travel through that slab. It can travel up out of the ground, around the vapor barrier of the crawl space, and up in through the nooks and crannies. But once it's inside the house, it tends to accumulate in there, and not without a mitigation system. there's no way to prevent it. And it's estimated that 1 out of every 15 homes in the US have high radon in the breathing air. And that's considered 4.0 or higher, as you guys know. And typically in real estate transactions, that's a magic cutoff where if it's under 4.0, typically the seller would not have responsibility to mitigate. The buyer might still want to, but if it's over 4.0, typically, and you guys confirm if I'm saying this wrong, typically over 4.0, the seller would either provide a mitigation system or negotiate to cover the price. And a lot of these numbers are from World Health Organization and from the EPA. The EPA website, if you Google EPA residential radon, you'll get to a site with some very, very good information. Also, there's North Carolina, there's a website called ncradon.org, and that's a part of North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. That there's no certification required for testing or mitigation or anything in the state, but that's the part of DHHS that is really kind of moving toward heightening the awareness of the general population and of businesses to the dangers of radon. Why test? It's cancer-causing radioactive gas. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the country, and it's #1 after smoking. Of course, smoking is the highest. There's a double whammy for people who do smoke. Testing is the only way to know if you're at risk, and the lower concentration, the lower the risk. But then mitigation methods are pretty simple and straightforward and not terribly expensive. My understanding in Triangle area, a home radon mitigation system for breathing air is in that $1,200–1,500 range. So as real estate transaction surprises go, needing a radon mitigation system should never be a deal breaker. You know, as things go, that one's fairly easily to overcome. So interesting chart here. You see the estimated radon risk if you've never smoked, and that's based on if 1,000 people who never smoked were exposed to these levels, then the risk of cancer. And you know, if you look at that, 0.4 is outdoor, 1.3 is the average in the house, and then 4 is about that cutoff for where it is considered above 4 is considered dangerous, then 8 and 10. But if you look at that 4, say look at 4 and 10 there, you know, about 7 people out of 1,000 would be estimated at that level. You know, it goes up to about 18 if it's 10. Well, let's look at the combination with smoking. That goes from 7 to 62, and it goes from 18 to 150. So when you see the risk of lung cancer for smokers in high radon, it just is a kind of a double whammy, because basically those carcinogens from cigarette smoke perform their damage in a very similar manner to the radioactive particles from radon. So for smokers, it just really is a huge risk. Then if you go to that EPA site, you can go to this map, and it is interactive. You can zoom in on that website. But if you notice in North Carolina there, where you transition from the darker reddish colors down into the yellow for North Carolina, I think you can probably see my cursor on the screen. You see that little darker finger right there that just comes down out of Virginia. That's Granville County, Franklin County, and Wake County. So you see how that geological deposit I was referencing earlier comes down into North Carolina and really impacts the Triangle area. So if you get, you know, down toward the coastal plain in that area, you really see much less radon on average. And you get over north and west of us, you see a lot higher levels on average. And again, this is mapped out across the country from a lot of years of very good data. So that's kind of the, you know, quick overview to show you guys. This is part of a class that I teach that goes on, you know, it explains everything I just did, but it goes on to talk about how we test for it, how we mitigate for it. And we're talking about that testing and mitigation in breathing air and in well water, which, as you know, Wake County dropped a bomb couple of years ago from a study they'd done, and estimated about 1 in 5 Wake County wells had high radon in the drinking water. So some more things to talk about there, but I know probably have taken up more than the available time. So I'll wrap that up there. Again, Ed Roberson, HomeTeam Inspection Service, would love the opportunity to work with you guys. Those classes I can provide via Zoom or live. Just call on me if you'd like to do a series of those. And I would encourage you to visit our website at hometeam.com/triangle. You can meet our team. You go to the About tab, you can see our team. I've got 3 additional inspectors on staff. You can see the full list of services. There's a sample home inspection report and a sample pre-drywall report. And our price list is on there. So pre-drywalls, people are understanding more and more the value of those in new construction. We do a lot of pre-drywall at that stage before things start getting covered up. So I'll be happy to take any questions, and but not take a lot more of your time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Call on us if we can help you in any way.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Have a good meeting. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey, Jack, Ed, can you hear us?
Yes.
Ed, my
Excuse me?
question is there, yeah, this is Jack. My question is there a quick radon test versus like a full radon test? Is there some difference between that, or is there just one?
The question
just-
is there a quick radon test versus what now, Jack?
Versus just the full.
Versus
Just the full
traditional. No, because and here's the reason. If you see pretty much, and I can show you thousands of graphs, at any given moment, you could have very low radon in the home, but still over the period, you would average high, because you're going to see it's almost always a sawtooth. If you've seen radon tests with the graphs, it might be 10 picocuries in one reading and 2 in the other. So if you had something that tested, that did a momentary test, you wouldn't get real valid information, because you might get it at the time that was reading 2 picocuries, you might get it at the time that was reading 10 picocuries. And so your breathing and your health effect is based on what's the average over time. So the testing is too. Now, radon testing outside of real estate transactions is typically a lot longer, 90 days, 120 days, that sort of thing. And that was from the mining industry, where people are working underground and they know they're exposed to a lot of things, and even higher levels than we are above ground. But in a real estate transaction, they decided years ago that 48 hours gives you enough time without taking so much of your due diligence period. So you get a good snapshot of it over a 48-hour period. But actually, I probably should put I'll email Sean one of our radon reports, and you can see what happens hour to hour on that data. So if you're taking a snapshot, you're not going to get, you might get a scare because it's really high that hour, but overall, if you did a 48-hour test, it might be really low. Or conversely, you might get a low reading and think you're safe and not be. So I'll send Sean I'll email that to Sean now, and you guys can see what that graph typically looks like.
Jack, it's the atmospheric temperature and barometric pressure.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Say again.
Great, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ed. That was a good answer.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you,
welcome.
thank you, Ed.
I heard some mention of atmospheric and barometric. Our tests also do, in fact, test the environment for good reasons, primarily to ensure there's no tampering with the machine. You need closed house conditions for testing so that you're representing the actual breathing air. In other words, if there's a lot of doors and windows open and closed and that sort of thing, where you're doing a lot of air exchange, you're not going to get a real good look at what's actually happening in the home. So you need those closed house conditions, and that's considered 12 hours prior to the start of the test. So if there was any unusual activity going on prior, you would need to be 12 hours past that. The protocol does account for normal residential coming in, going, because that's the way you live. That's the way the conditions are going to be. But we also test in that for temperature, relative humidity, barometric pressure, and it has a motion sensor. So if somebody picked that up and took it out on the deck to cheat the test, we're going to know that because it's not going to represent the conditions in the home at that time.
The difference between the active and the passive.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
How does the test work? Is it a material that absorbs the air over time, or is it something that tells you moment to moment?
No, they're called, you hear them called continuous monitors. There's actually two primary types. Let me go back to the old days. They were, and you still, you don't see them as much, but they're still available. And in fact, you can buy them at Lowe's. There is what's a charcoal canister. It's a canister test. And what that works is by, you uncover the top and it has holes in the canister. And so in a room, you have what's called diffusion. You know, in nature, things want to mix. You pour dye in water and it tends to mix out in the water. If you introduce a gas into the air, over time it will mix in the air. So the radon in a space will pretty much even out through the air. So if you're testing in one spot, it's pretty fairly representative of what's going on in the whole area. So with that canister, as that air passes through, the charcoal will actually absorb the radon gas. You ship that off to the lab, they bake it out, and they read the radioactive release of the gas, and they can tell you what the average was over that 48-hour period. But they're only going to be able to tell you the overall end result average. They're not going to be able to tell you hour to hour. What's called continuous monitors. Continuous is a little bit of a tricky word. It's not continuous like moment to moment or second to second. It takes a reading every hour. And what those are, our machines actually have 4 sensors that as that air passes through, they're electronically reading and reacting and to that radon gas. So it affects, and it's complicated, you know, it's magic. But there are 4 of them, and they're taking 4 readings and then averaging that, and then taking those hourly readings over that 48-hour period and averaging that, so that when you get the report, you've got what the overall average is, but you also have a graph. And when I say that sawtooth graph, and you'll see that when I send it, it will tell you if I started it at 10 o'clock this morning, it's reading then, it's going to read at 11, it's going to read at 12, 1, and on 24 hours a day for 48 hours. And it's going to graph what happens hour to hour. And the value of that speaks to what my answer to the, is there a test that you can go in and get instantaneous? You're going to see one piece of data would be very misleading, because it might be very low for what your overall average is, or it might be very high. And it's that overall average that represents the danger to the client, because the health effect is over time. So you want to know what's that average over time. Hope that answered it clear enough. But you'll see on that report exactly what I mean, and you'll see the other environmental measurements tracking. Any more questions? Guys, I really appreciate your time. Look forward to getting an opportunity to meet and work with you guys. I see Dan's joined us. Dan and I have gotten to know each other pretty well lately, and really appreciate joining you all today. And this is, you know, the technical stuff I love talking about. I'm always available, willing, happy to help, and look forward to the opportunity to work with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Well,